The castle is not awake yet. Not really. The fires are coals. The halls are dim. The wind whispers through the cracks in the stone, carrying with it the scent of damp straw, oil, and soot. Somewhere far above, a servant stirs. She wakes first, not because she wants to, but because she must. There are dozens of rooms in this place, some grand, most not. You might picture a castle as a gleaming monument of luxury, but that's a vision, crafted by fairy tales and postcard painters. In truth, castles were cold, creaking machines of survival, part fortress, part village, part prison, and always hungry. Hungry for labor, for wood, for warmth, for grain and meat and candle wax. Every day within these walls begins with the business of staving off nature, cold, rain, rot, and making sure the food does not run out. But before any of that, the castle breathes. Slowly, softly, life begins to stretch awake. The servants are the first heartbeat. Their footsteps are light but constant, bare feet on stone. Some carry buckets, others brooms. One hauls chamber pots down winding stairs to the dung pit near the postern gate. It's a vile job, but a necessary one. In a cramped room near the kitchens, the baker strikes flint against steel, coaxing the oven to life. Outside, a boy trudges across the frost-hardened courtyard, drawing water from the well. He winces at the cold, but doesn't speak. You might think the lord and lady are still sleeping, but they're not. Their chamber, larger than the rest, is not exactly warm either. Tapestries cover the stone, to keep in what little heat the fire gave before dying out. A servant has already crept in to relight the hearth and lay out robes. The lady stares at the ceiling beams. She's been awake since the bell rang before dawn. Her mind is on letters, on stores of saltfish, on rumors from the north. The lord sits in silence at a wooden table, a heavy goblet of watered wine before him, a sheathed dagger beside it. Not all power brings peace. There is always another tax to levy, another knight to appease, another cousin scheming, another peasant petitioning for timber to repair a cottage. The castle may be stone, but within it, everything moves. The air outside begins to lift. A rooster crows again. The guards on the north wall yawn behind their spears. One scratches at lice under his coif. The blacksmith's boy hurries past, carrying a bundle of firewood. A kitchen dog sniffs at spilled grain before being chased off by a cook with a ladle. Soon, the great hall will open. Breakfast is a strange word here. For the lord and his family, it might mean hot pottage and meat, thick bread, and mulled cider. For everyone else, it's crusts, dried onions, maybe a bowl of barley soup, if you're lucky. But food is food, and warmth is warmth. The chapel bell rings again. One long, low note. It means Mass is near. The priest moves like a shadow through the side corridor, his robe brushing against the wall. He does not smile. There is little laughter this early, not because the castle is unhappy, but because it has no time for illusions. The truth no one tells you about life inside a medieval castle. It was not a fantasy. It was a world of rhythm, duty, hierarchy, and constant motion. Everything you see, every flagstone, every goblet, every window slit, was built to serve a purpose. And that purpose wasn't luxury, it was endurance. As the light grows stronger, the castle finally wakes. From the smithy to the storerooms, the chapel to the kitchen, the great hall to the dungeon, 1,000 small tasks
Castles
begin.
are often remembered
The
by their
castle
towers
does not
and
roar to
gates,
life.
their great
It hums.
halls and outer walls.
But most of what truly happened inside one happened in the spaces you weren't meant to see. The forgotten rooms, the in-between spaces, the ones that don't show up in paintings or poems, but that shape daily life more than any throne ever could. Begin below. Beneath the surface of the castle, you'll find the undercroft, a vaulted chamber of damp earth and low ceilings, often used for storage. The floor is cold and uneven. Crates of barley, sacks of salt, coils of rope, sometimes a barrel of fish packed so tightly in brine that even the rats hesitate. In the far corner, iron hooks hang from wooden beams. A butcher worked here once, and though the air is still, it carries a memory of blood, of work. Torchlight reveals a small door to the side. Few go there. That's the dungeon, or more accurately, the jail. Not the iron-spiked horror of films, but something simpler and somehow worse. A small dark room where a man might sit for days with nothing but straw and silence. There were no clocks in the dungeon, only the drip of water from the stone above, the scurry of mice, and the weight of waiting. Not all prisoners were criminals. Some were political. Some were just poor. Others were being kept for ransom, a kind of insurance paid not in coin, but in power. Leave the undercroft, climb the servant's stair, narrow, winding. The steps are uneven, by design. It slows the climb of invaders and the descent of the careless. On the second level, there's a side hallway rarely used by nobles. The walls here are bare. The air smells of wax and old linen. This is the Maiden's Passage, where the laundry girls and linen servants move between the guest rooms and the solar. Here, the castle whispers, snatches of gossip about the steward's wine, rumors about a night's late-night visitor. The linens bear secrets too, stains not spoken of, embroidered initials torn out and restitched. At the end of the hall, there's a locked door. Behind it, the treasury. Not gold piled in heaps. That's the stuff of dragon stories. Instead, there are ledgers, seals, iron keys, the Lord's signet in a small velvet pouch, wax tablets scratched with debts. A box of coins, yes, but also bolts of fine wool, exotic spices wrapped in cloth, a carved horn cup given by a visiting noble. Wealth, here, is not just money. It is favors, documents, promises. Even higher, in a quiet corner of the keep, lies the solar, a room meant for retreat, used mostly by the lady of the house. Light filters through stained glass. Embroidered cushions line a wooden bench. There is a sense of warmth here, rare in this place. On a table, a half-finished letter in Latin. Next to it, a needle and thread. A child's toy, a carved wooden horse, lies forgotten under a stool. This was not a world without emotion. It just didn't wear it plainly. Beyond the solar is a narrow stone corridor that leads to the chapel, a quiet, intimate place. One candle is always kept lit. The crucifix above the altar bears not just a Christ, but the wear of centuries of whispered prayers. In the pews, sometimes a soldier kneels, sometimes a servant, sometimes no one. And in that stillness, the castle speaks, not in words, but in the language of time. You begin to see how much of the castle's life pulsed through these unseen arteries. The spaces where food was moved, secrets passed, lives hidden. The visible castle, the banners, the battlements, the lords and ladies, is only half the truth. The rest was stone and silence. Hallways that heard your footsteps before your name. Doors that opened only one way. And rooms that remembered what no one else did. The kitchen is the true heart of the castle. Not the throne room, not the lord's chambers, not even the chapel. It's here, in the heat and chaos, that the pulse of the fortress can be felt. Because castles do not simply shelter people, they must feed them, every single day. And they must do it with precision. Behind thick wooden doors and below vaulted ceilings blackened with soot, the kitchen crew has already been awake for hours. A dozen people, or more depending on the season, move in practiced chaos. Not just cooks. Bakers, spit boys, pot washers, servers, scullions. Each has a place. Each has a duty. At the center of it all, the hearth. The fire never dies. Even in the dead of night, a lone apprentice tends the embers, making sure there will be flame by morning. Logs are stacked in one corner. A turning spit creaks slowly, skewering a haunch of venison. The smell is rich, sharp, and primal. Nearby, someone grinds spices by hand: cinnamon, clove, pepper. These are not common. They are imported treasures, locked in storerooms, rationed by the steward. In medieval castles, food was not just nourishment, it was display. Hierarchy defined every plate. The lord and lady might dine on roasted swan, dressed with almond paste and saffron. They would drink wine, imported or sweetened. Their bread would be white, soft, and made from the finest sifted flour. A trained carver would present meat at the table, slicing precisely in front of guests. Meanwhile, the servants' table told a very different story: coarse brown bread, onion pottage, barley stew, dried fish if lucky, ale, but watered, and little of it. Still, food was food, and the castle's ability to feed even its lowest workers was a kind of promise. As long as the ovens burned and the stores held, life continued. But the system was fragile. Everything had to be planned. Consider the scale. A medium-sized castle might need to feed 100 people each day, sometimes more. That's hundreds of pounds of grain, dozens of barrels of ale, a constant rotation of livestock: pigs, geese, sheep, all of it stored, guarded, and counted. The steward held the records, locked in his ledger. The cellarer oversaw the barrels and cured meats. The butler, not just a modern house servant, but a powerful officer, was in charge of the buttery where drinks were stored and rationed. Even the baker had status. He controlled one of the most precious things in the entire castle: the oven. Bread was life, and the oven was power. Waste was rare. Bones were boiled. Offal was spiced and eaten. Yesterday's bread became today's trencher, a thick slice of stale bread used as a plate, then tossed to dogs or the poor after the meal. In winter, dried herbs and smoked meat. In summer, fresh greens, wild berries, and fish from the river. On feast days, the castle transformed. Whole animals roasted on open spits. Tables groaned with pies shaped like birds, filled with savory meats. Musicians played. Guests watched in awe as sugar sculptures were paraded past, sweetened luxuries carved into castles, unicorns, saints. It was not just about indulgence. It was a performance of wealth, of stability, of control. But beneath it all, beneath the pageantry and peppered stews, was fear. What if the stores ran out? What if the harvest failed? What if siege came? Because every castle, no matter how mighty, had one great weakness: its belly. No matter how high the walls, if the kitchens fell silent, everything else followed. And so the cooks rose early. The fires stayed hot. The cellars were counted twice, because stone can protect, but only food keeps you alive. A siege doesn't begin with fire. It begins with waiting. The castle, once a place of rhythm and duty, becomes a cocoon of tension. The usual buzz of daily life dulls to quiet watchfulness. Soldiers no longer drill in the yard. They take up positions. Servants no longer venture far. They ration light and breath. Everyone listens, because in siege, sound is everything. The beat of drums, the thud of hooves, the creak of siege towers in the distance. It all carries across the moor like a whispered threat. There is no doubt. Something is coming, and it may take days, or weeks, or months. Castles were built for this. The thick walls, the high towers, the narrow slits in the stone. The design of a fortress is not just to repel an enemy, but to wait them out, to choke off the advance until time, hunger, and desperation win the war before a single blade crosses a wall. The drawbridge is raised, the portcullis lowered, the outer gates barred with timber as thick as a man's waist. Within, supplies are counted again and again: barrels of grain, jugs of oil, stores of salted pork and dried legumes. Casks of water are sealed tight, stored in cool places. The well becomes sacred. Every mouth matters now, and that includes animals. The chickens, kept for eggs; the pigs, rationed; the dogs, useful, until they're not. Even the cats, once cherished for hunting rats, begin to vanish if the siege drags on. Siege is not like open battle, it is psychological warfare. The enemy rarely charges on the first day. Instead, they wait, surround, dig in, build towers, catapults, trebuchets. The sounds of construction echo across the fields. Taunts are shouted from beyond the moat. Drums beat through the night, not to attack, but to remind you that they're still there, and that they can wait longer than you. Inside, the castle changes. Guards rotate more often. The captain of arms walks the walls at dawn and dusk. The chapel is always full. Prayers whispered not for glory, but survival. The castle's children are kept indoors. Their laughter, once common, disappears. No one wants to eat too much. No one wants to sleep too deeply. And everyone watches the walls. Archers test their bows. Tar is heated. Rocks are stacked near the parapets. If the enemy comes too close, arrows fly and boiling oil pours. But for now, nothing. Just stares, exchanged across a field. Siege weapons begin to move. A trebuchet is no silent machine. It groans. It sings like a giant in pain. And when it releases its payload, a stone the size of a barrel, the world changes. The walls shake. The dust rises. And people remember they can die here. But the real danger comes slowly. When the first barrel of water goes sour, when the rats no longer run, when someone coughs and doesn't stop. Siege is not just about walls falling. It's about people breaking. Arguments flare over food. Servants begin stealing. Guards speak in hushed tones at the gate. The Lord, once regal, now stares at the same ledger every night, fingers trembling just slightly. Outside, the attackers build another tower. Inside, the silence grows. And then one night, the trebuchet is quiet. The campfires on the horizon are dim. No sounds come from the fields. This can mean two things. Either they've gone, or tomorrow they attack. And so the castle waits. Stone holds fast, but human hearts are softer. Inside a medieval castle, power was a performance as much as a fact. The lord and lady were not just rulers, they were symbols, the living embodiment of authority. Every gesture, every word, every meal, and every glance was carefully staged to reinforce their place at the apex of the castle's intricate hierarchy, the Great Hall, the theatre of rule. The Great Hall was the heart of this performance. Here, decisions were made in full view of nobles, knights, servants, and visiting dignitaries. The Lord's chair sat atop a dais, raised above all others, literally and figuratively. The seating order was no accident. Guests were arranged by rank. Close allies sat nearest the Lord. Lesser knights and common soldiers farther away. The hall was decorated to impress. Banners with family crests, suits of armor gleaming under torchlight, an embroidered cloth of gold draped along the walls. Every feast was a spectacle. Roasted boars were paraded in on spits. Minstrels played haunting melodies, and the Lord's cup was filled with the finest wine. But beneath the surface, Every interaction carried meaning. A simple nod could grant favor. A slight glance could signal disapproval. A carefully chosen word could sway loyalty. The lady of the castle. The lady wielded power in subtler ways. She managed the household, oversaw the servants, and controlled the domestic economy. Sometimes the castle's only true running source of stability. Her chambers were private, yet vital. Here, she entertained female guests, managed the spinning and weaving of cloth, and maintained the family's lineage through marriage and childbirth. The lady's influence stretched beyond the walls. She arranged alliances, brokered peace, and often acted as regent if the lord was away at war. Her power was woven into every fabric of castle life. The lesser nobles and knights below the lord and lady were their vassals, knights sworn to service. Their armor was a badge of honor, their swords symbols of duty and protection. Knights trained relentlessly, jousted in tournaments, served in war. But in peace, they often found themselves navigating the delicate politics of the court, attending feasts, and proving their loyalty through ceremony. The servants and commoners. At the base of the social pyramid were the servants, cooks, stable hands, scullions, and more. They kept the castle running. But their lives were harsh. Many slept in cramped quarters, worked long hours, and lived under the constant watch of overseers. Yet their roles were essential. Without their labor, the castle's grandeur would collapse. Rituals of power. Rituals filled the day, from the raising of banners at dawn to evening prayers in the chapel. Justice was dispensed in the hall, often in public trial, reinforcing the Lord's role as judge and protector. Marriage ceremonies, feasts, and religious festivals punctuated the calendar, reminding everyone of their place. Power was visible and vulnerable, but power was also fragile. A lord who failed to maintain favor risked rebellion. A lady who could not produce heirs faced social ruin. A knight who disobeyed lost honor. Every action was watched, every word recorded in memory and rumor. Within the stone walls, power was both a promise and a threat. It held the castle together, and it could tear it apart. Castles stand today not just as relics of stone and mortar, but as echoes of an era long gone. Their walls whisper stories of power and fear, of grandeur and hardship. More than fortresses, medieval castles were much more than military installations. They were centers of administration, hubs of local justice, homes for entire communities, and symbols of a social order built on loyalty, faith, and sometimes violence. Each castle was a microcosm of the medieval world. The divisions within its walls mirrored the broader society. Nobles and commoners, rulers and ruled, warriors and workers. Lessons in architecture and innovation castles pushed the boundaries of medieval engineering. From motte and bailey beginnings to towering stone keeps, each generation improved defenses, thicker walls, moats, murder holes, concentric designs. They adapted to changing warfare, archers, siege engines, and eventually gunpowder. Every stone was placed with purpose, both practical and psychological. Human stories behind the stones. Yet beneath the grandeur were millions of human stories, of families who lived and died behind those walls, of servants who toiled unseen, of soldiers who stood watch through bitter winters and sieges. The castle was a stage where lives played out in courage, fear, love, and loss. Castles as symbols. Today, now, centuries later, castles inspire fascination. Tourists marvel at their scale. Historians unravel their secrets. Artists and writers find endless stories to tell. But perhaps the greatest lesson is this. Castles remind us that history is lived by people. Not just kings and queens, but the countless unseen souls whose lives built the world we know, enduring mystery and myth. Despite all we know, castles hold mysteries. What conversations echoed in silent halls? What dreams flickered in candlelight? What fears haunted sleepless nights? These questions keep history alive, inviting us to look deeper. The castle's final wordstone may crumble, paintings may fade, but the legacy remains, a testament to humanity's desire to build, protect, and belong, to carve meaning from uncertainty, to find shelter, not just from enemies, but from the unknown. And as we walk through their ruins, listen closely, for the castle is still speaking.